Welcome to the deep dive. Ever feel like digital sheet music, like it has a mind of its own sometimes when it comes to tempo
Oh,
especially.
absolutely.
Yeah. We're right there with you.
Yeah.
Today we are tackling tempo markings in ABC notation, specifically that what is it? That tricky little Q field.
Right.
You ran into some issues with the ABC2's VG,
Yeah.
and trust us, you are not alone.
You have stumbled onto a topic that, oh man, it sparks some passionate debates in the digital music world.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Luckily, we've got this treasure trove of forum thread from the choosers community to kind of guide us through this.
Right, musicians, programmers, even get the creator of ABC2 Zishi himself.
Wow.
They're all weighing in. So level with us. How much do you really know about the Q field?
So, maybe you've opened an ABC file, you've seen something like QNet 20, and you think, okay, easy, 120 beats per minute.
Right, makes sense.
And you know what? You wouldn't be entirely wrong. That's how the older standard worked.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
Of course. There's always a but. The plot thickens, right?
Okay.
As software evolved, developers, they decided it wasn't enough to just say how many beats per minute.
Really?
They wanted more.
Wow.
The newer standard wants you to specify the type of note that gets the beat.
Okay, give us an example because my brain already feels like it's doing math over here.
Okay, so imagine QDAT 1 120. So that means you'd have 120 quarter notes per minute.
Okay.
It's all about being extra precise, especially for those tunes with, more complex time signatures.
Hold on, time signatures, and now we're really getting into it. So
Mm.
we've got this Q field for tempo.
Right.
We've got the M field for time signature.
Right.
And they've got to work together.
They got to work together. Think of it like this. If the tempo is the speed limit,
Okay.
the time signature is like deciding if you're on a highway or like a winding country road,
Okay.
Both impact how smoothly your journey goes, right?
Okay. I'm starting to see why this could cause some issues.
Yeah.
What happens if a program misinterprets how the Q field and the M field work together?
Oh, it could be like trying to waltz to a march.
Oh, no.
Same tempo, wrong feel.
Oh,
Let's
no.
unpack a real-world example so you can see this in action.
Bring on the real-world examples. The more practical, the better, I always say.
Let's talk about hornpipes. You find them notated in 2/4 time or 4/4 time, depending on who wrote it down.
Okay.
Now, if software isn't sure how to interpret that Q field in relation to that, you might end up with a hornpipe twice as fast as it should be.
And nobody wants a sped-up hornpipe. So what's the big takeaway here? Should we all become ABC notation experts just to listen to music?
No, don't worry. You don't need a degree in music theory.
Okay, good.
The key is awareness.
Okay.
Different programs, they might handle tempo markings a little differently, especially with, older ABC files.
So how do we avoid these tempo mishaps? Let's break it down after a quick break. And we are back. Before the break, we were talking about how digital sheet music can sometimes have, a mind of its own
Right.
when it comes to tempo.
That's true.
But fear not.
Yeah.
Dear listener, we've got you covered.
Absolutely.
We were talking about those older files that just use Q.100 without specifying the note value.
Right. Yeah, those can be tricky.
Ah, those digital relics. So what's a music lover to do when they encounter one of these, vintage tunes?
Well, one helpful tip, actually, from the forum is to double-check the intended tempo. Like, see if there are any notes in the ABC file itself or, like, additional information about the piece, maybe online.
Okay.
You might find a clue about what the composer's original intent was.
Like a digital treasure hunt for the right tempo.
Exactly.
I like it. And if those old files are, throwing you off,
Yeah.
what's the best way to ensure your own ABC notation is crystal clear?
When in doubt, be specific. Like, instead of just Q120, go for Q.1 120
Okay.
to make it crystal clear that you want 120 quarter notes per minute.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Clear communication is key.
Always.
Even with sheet music. But let's get back to those situations where even the time signature might not tell the whole story.
Right.
Our friend the hornpipe, oh boy, caused quite a stir in the forum, didn't it?
It did. It's a prime example of, like, musical tradition potentially clashing with strict notation rules.
Oh, interesting.
There was a whole debate about whether a hornpipe should be notated in 2/4 or 4/4.
So it's not always as simple as plugging in the Q and M fields and calling it a day.
Not always, no. Sometimes you need to channel your inner musician
Right.
to really capture the essence of the music.
I like it.
Think of it like this music notation is a language.
Okay.
And
Uh-huh.
just like any language, it has dialects, it has nuances,
Mm.
you know.
So what I'm hearing is don't be afraid to use your ears and
Yeah,
your instincts.
absolutely. You know, this whole discussion about hornpipes, it reminded me of another interesting point raised in the forum.
Oh, yeah.
Um, they were talking about using named tempos in ABC notation, like Allegro or Andante.
Oh, yes. It sounds like something you'd order at a fancy Italian restaurant.
Right.
So how do those work? They seem a bit more subjective than just a specific BPM.
That's where things get, really interesting because while they might sound fancy, these named tempos are actually mapped to specific BPMs in ABCJS.
Interesting.
So Q Allegro would actually be treated the same as Q110.6.
So it's like having a shortcut that already has a built-in tempo
Exactly.
based on musical tradition.
Precisely.
That's pretty cool.
It is. But it also, highlights the importance of knowing your software
Right.
because different programs might interpret these named tempos, slightly differently.
So it's always a good idea to double check and make sure everything is playing back as intended.
Always a good idea to double check.
Just like we shouldn't trust a GPS blindly, you know? We've got to use our judgment with digital sheet music, too.
Exactly. And that brings us back to one of the most important points of this entire deep dive awareness.
And we're back. It's fascinating how something as seemingly straightforward as tempo can become this deep rabbit hole of like notation and interpretation and even a bit of digital music history, you know?
It really is. It speaks to the heart of how music is both an art and a science.
Right.
We have these systems to try and capture the intangible,
Yeah.
but there's always room for nuance.
And speaking of nuance, we can't avoid the elephant in the room,
Right.
or should I say the hornpipe on the digital dance floor.
Here it is.
The debate about its correct notation in our Abusers forum. Oh, it was pretty lively.
It was very lively.
People had feelings.
It's a perfect example of what we've been talking about, right? Some folks felt strongly that 2/4 that best represents that driving, like 2 beats per bar feel of a traditional hornpipe.
Makes sense. I mean, if you're used to like dancing to it that way, the
Mhm.
notation should reflect that.
Exactly. But then, others argue that using 4/4 gave them more like flexibility, especially with, more complex variations. It's about finding the notation that best serves the music and the musician.
So no easy answers there.
No.
It's more about understanding the different perspectives and making informed choices as a musician.
Precisely. And it highlights a crucial point about digital sheet music. Flexibility is key.
Yeah.
Software developers, they're constantly working to create programs that can handle those quirky edge cases,
Right.
the situations where the traditional rules might not quite cut it.
So what's the final verdict on this hornpipe debate? Should our listener grab their pitchforks and defend 2/4?
I don't think so because it's not about declaring one right way.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that different interpretations and conventions exist.
Okay.
And sometimes it's okay to simply agree to disagree.
I love that. It's like saying, "Hey, we all hear the music, we all feel the rhythm.
Right.
Let's just celebrate that shared experience,
Yep.
even if we notate it a tad differently."
Beautifully put. And that brings us back to our main takeaway for today.
What's that?
When diving into the world of digital sheet music, especially with something like ABC notation, a little awareness goes a long way.
So to our listener who sparked this whole deep dive,
That's
we
right.
hope you're feeling more empowered to navigate those tempo quirks
Yeah.
and trust your musical instincts.
Absolutely. And remember, behind every line of ABC notation is a world of human expression waiting to be unlocked.
I like it.
So go forth, explore, and keep the music playing.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That is a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, happy listening.